Please, save my mama. He's hurting her bad. The desperate cry tore through the quiet suburban avenue, like a knife slicing the night's calm. The voice, small but fierce with terror, echoed across the shadowed road, bouncing off the marble gates of Garfield Estate. Aria Adams, just 6 years old, burst through those gates, her bare feet slapping cold pavement. Her cotton nightdress, smudged with dirt, clung to her trembling frame. Tears streaked her brown cheeks, glinting under dim streetlights, as a frayed pink ribbon dangled loosely from her unraveling braid. She stumbled forward, driven by panic, her tiny hands clutching that ribbon like a lifeline. Across the street, outside a flickering neon-lit diner, a group of bikers lounging beside their chrome machines snapped to attention. Engines idled softly beneath the starry sky. The largest among them, Marcus Steele, a broad-shouldered man with a jagged scar tracing his cheek, froze mid-bite of a greasy sandwich. His eyes narrowed, shifting from casual ease to sharp concern as the child's plea hit him like a shockwave. "Where is she, sweetheart?" he asked, kneeling to her level, his gravelly voice steady but urgent. Aria's tear-filled eyes locked on his, her finger jabbing toward the glowing mansion atop the hill. "The rich man, he's beating my mama." Marcus's jaw tightened. He rose, exchanging a glance with his crew. Without a word, he signaled 2 men, Tank and Grit, with a curt nod. The air trembled as engines roared to life, their rumble a gathering storm of justice. But before those bikes surged forward, before the night erupted into action, the day had begun like any other for Lily Adams, the woman Aria called Mama. That morning, sunlight poured through the towering glass walls of Garfield Estate, a sprawling fortress of wealth perched on the city's edge. Silver chandeliers cast prisms across polished marble floors, and manicured lawns stretched endlessly under the golden glow. Every surface gleamed with sterile perfection, a testament to opulence that masked the struggles within. Lily Adams, 30 years old, moved through the grand halls with quiet grace, her maid's uniform spotless despite the roughness of her hands. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, her face soft but etched with the weariness of survival. She scrubbed a stubborn smudge on the foyer floor, her movements precise yet heavy with exhaustion. For nearly 2 years, she'd toiled here, transforming the estate into a showcase of pristine order. But to her, it was more than a workplace. It was a gilded cage, its beauty a cruel contrast to her unseen labor. 3 years ago, Lily's world had shattered when her husband, a construction worker, plummeted from a scaffold in a tragic accident. Left alone with their daughter, Aria, she'd clawed her way through grief to provide a future for her little girl. The job at Garfield Estate, grueling as it was, had been her lifeline, a way to keep Aria fed, clothed and dreaming. In a small corner of the servants' wing, Aria sat cross-legged on a threadbare rug, surrounded by scraps of paper and a handful of worn pencils. Her tongue poked out in concentration as she sketched a lopsided house with a bright yellow sun above it. "Mama, look," she chirped, holding up her drawing proudly. "It's our house one day, with flowers and no yelling." Lily paused, her cloth still in hand, and offered a tender smile that didn't quite reach her tired eyes. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," she said softly. "We'll have that house, you and me, with all the flowers you want." Aria giggled, her innocence a fleeting warmth in the sterile mansion. "And you'll rest, Mama. No more cleaning for mean people." The words stung, though Lily hid it, turning back to her work with a slow breath. "One day, my love," she whispered, her voice barely audible. As the morning stretched into afternoon, Lily moved from room to room, polishing banisters, dusting shelves, arranging fresh linens. The air carried the faint scent of lemon cleaner, clinging to her skin like a second uniform. Her shoulders ached, her palms raw from hours of scrubbing. But she pressed on, driven by the need to keep this job, to keep Arya safe. Arya trailed her occasionally, offering small helps, a clumsy sweep of a rag, a cheerful hum, her presence a reminder of why Lily endured. By late afternoon, the estate hummed with quiet perfection, every surface ready for its demanding master. Then, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of amber, a sharp buzz crackled through the intercom on the wall. Lily flinched, her heart sinking as the cold voice of Andrew Garfield, the billionaire owner, filled the room. "Lily," he snapped, his tone cutting like glass. "My study better be spotless before sunset. No excuses." She swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around the cloth. "Yes, sir," she replied, voice steady despite the dread curling in her chest. The call ended with a click, leaving silence in its wake. Lily glanced at Arya, still doodling, oblivious to the storm brewing. Outside, the estate's marble gates gleamed under the fading light, a deceptive calm settling over the grounds. But in that moment, the weight of Garfield's words hung heavy, a quiet warning of the chaos yet to come. Lily exhaled slowly, her breath barely audible in the cavernous foyer. The polished marble beneath her feet reflected the last glimmers of daylight, each tile a mirror to the estate's cold perfection. Beyond the towering glass walls, the manicured lawns stretched into twilight, their emerald blades swaying in a gentle breeze. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast soft prisms across the room, their elegance a cruel mockery of her labor. Every gleaming surface, every spotless corner, bore the mark of her hands. Hands now rough and calloused, stained with the faint scent of polish that never fully washed away. The Garfield estate was a fortress of wealth, but for Lily Adams, it was a battlefield where exhaustion and invisibility waged a relentless war. She knelt to gather her cleaning supplies, her knees protesting from hours of bending. At 30, her body felt older, worn by 2 years of relentless work and the deeper ache of grief. 3 years ago, her husband's death in a construction accident had stolen her dreams of a simple, happy life. Now, every scrub, every polished banister, was for Arya, her 6-year-old daughter, her reason to keep going. Lily glanced again at the little girl, who was adding bright green trees to her sketch of a dream house. The sight softened the edges of her fatigue, if only for a moment. The other staff members moved through the mansion like ghosts, their interactions with Lily as cold as the marble floors. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Claremont, a wiry woman with pinched lips, barely acknowledged her unless issuing orders. The groundskeeper and kitchen staff, all older and entrenched in the estate's hierarchy, cast sidelong glances that carried the weight of judgment. To them, Lily was an outsider, not just poor, but black, her presence a quiet disruption in their ordered world. Their whispered comments in the break room, about her place or her kind, stung like paper cuts, small but cumulative. She bore it silently, her pride a shield, her focus on Arya's future. As evening approached, the mansion buzzed with preparations for Andrew Garfield's latest gathering. Lily adjusted vases, fluffed cushions, and wiped down the long mahogany dining table, her movements swift but precise. The guests, businessmen in tailored suits and women in glittering dresses, arrived with laughter that echoed through the halls. Lily kept her head down, blending into the background, but Garfield's sharp eyes found her. During the cocktail hour, as she refilled a tray of champagne flutes, she misjudged a step, and a single glass tipped, spilling a few drops onto the pristine tablecloth. The room seemed to freeze. Garfield, standing nearby with a cluster of investors, turned, his gaze icy. "Lily," he said, his voice low but laced with venom, "is it so hard to manage a simple task?" The guests shifted uncomfortably, their chatter faltering. A woman in pearls tittered nervously, her eyes darting away. Lily's cheeks burned, but she murmured, "I'm sorry, sir. I'll replace it immediately." "See that you do," he snapped, his words a public lash. "I don't pay for incompetence." He turned back to his guests with a forced chuckle, dismissing her as if she were nothing. The staff nearby exchanged glances, but said nothing, their silence louder than any rebuke. Lily's hands shook as she mopped up the spill, her pride stinging more than her sore muscles. Hours later, after the guests had departed and the mansion settled into a heavy quiet, Lily retreated to the cramped servants' quarters she shared with Arya. The room was a stark contrast to the estate's grandeur. A single bed, a small table, and a flickering lamp casting shadows on peeling wallpaper. Arya lay curled under a thin blanket, her pencils scattered beside her. Lily sat gently on the bed's edge, brushing a stray braid from her daughter's face. "We'll leave one day, baby," she whispered, her voice soft but resolute. "Somewhere warm, where you can draw all day and never worry." Arya's eyes fluttered open, sleepy but bright. "When we leave, can I still draw big houses like this one?" she asked, her voice full of innocent hope. Lily's heart ached, but she smiled. "Bigger ones, sweetheart. With gardens and sunshine, all for us." Arya grinned, snuggling closer. "Promise, Mama?" "Promise," Lily said, kissing her forehead. The moment was a fleeting oasis, a reminder of why she endured. But rest was short-lived. Deep into the night, as Lily lay on the narrow cot beside Arya, her phone buzzed harshly. She fumbled for it, her heart sinking at the name. Andrew Garfield. His voice cut through the line, cold and demanding. "Lily, I'm hosting Critical Partners tomorrow. I want every inch of this place spotless by morning. No mistakes this time." "Yes, sir," she managed, her voice hoarse. The call ended, leaving only the hum of the mansion's silence. Her back throbbed, her hands trembled, but she forced herself up. Pride kept her spine straight, even as exhaustion clawed at her. She slipped on her worn shoes, grabbed her cleaning caddy, and stepped back into the darkened halls. The grand staircase loomed before her, its marble steps reflecting the moonlight streaming through tall windows. She began wiping down the banisters, each stroke mechanical yet meticulous. The air was heavy with the scent of wax and the faint echo of her own breathing. She didn't hear the soft creak of footsteps above until it was too late. High on the balcony overlooking the foyer, Andrew Garfield stood, his silhouette sharp against the dim glow of a chandelier. His tailored robe hung loosely, but his eyes were predatory, glinting with a cold intensity. He leaned against the railing, watching Lily work below, her cloth moving faster under the weight of his stare. She was prey in his domain, and the promise of a storm loomed in his silence. The night deepened, wrapping the Garfield estate in a deceptive hush. Lily moved through the dining hall, her hands steady despite the ache in her wrists. The long mahogany table gleamed under the soft light of crystal fixtures, each place setting aligned with precision. She adjusted a silver fork, her breath shallow, every instinct urging her to finish and retreat to the safety of the servants' quarters. But the mansion felt alive tonight, its opulence a cage tightening around her. Earlier that day, Andrew Garfield had stormed out to a high-stakes meeting, his polished exterior masking a brewing desperation. A critical deal, an investment in a tech startup poised to reshape his portfolio, had been on the line. But the investors had backed out, citing market volatility, leaving Garfield humiliated and seething. By the time he returned, well past dusk, the air around him crackled with whiskey-soaked rage. The slam of the front door echoed through the halls like a gunshot, sending the staff scattering to their duties. Lily had heard the whispers among the maids. "He's in a mood tonight." She tried to stay out of his path, focusing on the dining hall preparations for his next gathering. But the vast estate offered no true hiding place. As she arranged porcelain plates, the sharp clack of Garfield's shoes announced his approach. Her pulse quickened, but she kept her eyes down, hoping to blend into the background as she always did. Arya sat quietly in the corner, her small frame tucked against the wall, a scrap of paper spread before her. Her pencil scratched softly, sketching a garden of oversized flowers under a bright sun. She hummed a tune, oblivious to the tension coiling in the room, her innocence a fragile light in the mansion's cold grandeur. Garfield burst into the dining hall, his suit jacket discarded, tie loosened, and a tumbler of amber liquid clutched in his hand. His eyes, bloodshot and wild, swept the room before landing on Lily. "Where's the centerpiece?" he barked, his voice thick with liquor. "You think I pay you to set half a table?" Lily froze, her hand hovering over a napkin she'd been folding. The floral arrangement hadn't arrived yet. The delivery was delayed, a fact she'd planned to address quietly. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, her voice calm but tight. "The florist was late, but I've arranged for—" "I don't want excuses," he roared, slamming his glass on the table. The whiskey sloshed, staining the pristine cloth. Arya flinched, her pencil pausing mid-stroke, her wide eyes darting to her mother. Lily took a step back, her hands raised slightly in a gesture of peace. "It'll be here first thing tomorrow, sir. I'll make sure everything's perfect." Garfield's lip curled, his pride stung by her calm response. "Perfect?" he sneered, stepping closer. "You think I pay you to sit around and smile like you're doing me a favor?" The words cut deep, each one a reminder of her invisibility in this house. Lily's throat tightened, but she held his gaze, her dignity a quiet defiance. "I'm doing my best, sir," she said softly. From the corner, Arya's small voice piped up, trembling but clear. "Please don't yell at my mama." The room stilled. Garfield's head snapped toward the child, his face darkening with humiliation. A maid daring to let her daughter speak out of turn. In his house, in front of him? His ego, already bruised from the failed deal, shattered like brittle glass. "What did you say?" he growled, his voice low and dangerous. Lily moved swiftly, placing herself between Arya and Garfield. "She didn't mean anything, sir," she said, her voice quaking but firm. "She's just a child." Arya's lip trembled, but she stood her ground, clutching her drawing. "You're being mean," she whispered, tears welling in her brown eyes. Garfield's face twisted, his rage boiling over. With a sudden, violent motion, he seized a crystal glass from the table and hurled it to the floor. It shattered between them, shards scattering across the marble like jagged stars. The sound was deafening, a crack that split the silence of the estate. Arya gasped, her small body shrinking back. Lily dropped to her knees instinctively, gathering the broken pieces with shaking hands. Her heart pounded, fear mingling with the sting of tears she refused to let fall. "I'll clean it up, sir," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Garfield loomed over her, his shadow swallowing the light. He grabbed her wrist, yanking her up with a force that made her gasp. Pain shot through her arm, but she bit back a cry, her eyes locked on Arya, who watched in horror. "You think you can talk back to me in my own house?" he snarled, his grip tightening. His breath reeked of whiskey, his words slurring with unchecked fury. "You and that brat think you're above me?" Lily's voice trembled, but she forced the words out. "Please, sir, let go. You're scaring her." Arya's scream pierced the air, raw and desperate. "Stop hurting my mama." Her tiny fists clenched, her drawing crumpled in her hand as tears streamed down her cheeks. Garfield's eyes flashed with something darker, rage fed by power, unchecked by conscience. He released Lily's wrist with a shove, sending her stumbling against the table's edge. She caught herself, pain flaring in her side, but her focus remained on Arya. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, though her voice shook. "Stay there." The other staff members lingered at the edges of the room, their faces pale, their silence complicit. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Claremont, hovered near the doorway, her lips pressed thin, offering no aid. The groundskeeper, stationed by the hall, averted his eyes. Their inaction was a weight heavier than Garfield's cruelty. Garfield turned on Arya, his voice a low growl. "Get that child out of here before I lose my patience." Garfield's words hung in the air, a chilling promise of worse to come. "Get that child out of here before I lose my patience." Lily's heart seized, her eyes darting to Arya, who stood frozen, her small frame trembling. The mansion's grandeur, the polished floors, the glittering chandeliers, seemed to close in, a gilded trap with no escape. The silence that followed was fragile, ready to shatter, as the storm within Garfield prepared to unleash its full fury. Lily's breath caught, her bruised wrist throbbing where Garfield's grip had bitten into her skin. She knelt swiftly, pulling Arya close, her voice a desperate whisper masked by urgency. "Go, baby," she breathed, her lips brushing her daughter's ear. "Run. Don't stop." Her eyes locked on Arya's, wide with fear but trusting, and in that fleeting moment, Lily poured every ounce of her strength into the command. Arya hesitated, her crumpled drawing slipping from her fingers to the marble floor. Her small chest heaved, tears streaking her brown cheeks, but the urgency in her mother's voice spurred her. With a stifled sob, she turned and bolted toward the servants' passage, her bare feet slapping against the cold stone. The heavy back door loomed ahead, a sliver of moonlight spilling through its crack. She shoved it open, the hinges groaning, and stumbled into the night. Outside, the Garfield estate sprawled under a vast, indifferent sky. The marble gates gleamed faintly, luxury cars parked in neat rows reflecting the moon's pale glow. The air was crisp, biting at Arya's exposed arms as she ran, her nightdress fluttering like a ghost in the dark. The long driveway stretched before her, lined with towering oaks that cast jagged shadows. Her lungs burned, each breath a ragged gasp, but she didn't slow. Behind her, the mansion loomed, its windows glowing like judgmental eyes. The estate guards, stationed near the entrance, froze as Arya darted past. Their radios crackled with static, but none moved to stop her. They'd seen Garfield's temper before. His wrath was a storm they dared not provoke. One guard, a younger man with a nervous tic, glanced toward the mansion, then back at the fleeing child, his hand hovering over his walkie-talkie before dropping in defeat. Their hesitation was a silent betrayal, leaving Arya alone in her desperate flight. Her small feet pounded the gravel, sharp stones biting into her soles, but she barely felt the pain. Sobs tore from her throat, echoing between the trees, her cries swallowed by the vastness of the night. Headlights from a passing car swept across the road, blurring through her tears, their drivers oblivious to the child's panic. The world seemed deaf, indifferent to her pleas, as if the stars themselves had turned away. Then, through the haze of her fear, she saw it. A flicker of neon in the distance, the 24-hour diner across the street. Its sign buzzed faintly, casting a warm glow over a row of motorcycles parked in the lot. The bikers lounged beside their machines, leather vests glinting, their low laughter mingling with the clink of coffee cups and the hum of idling engines. To Arya, they were a beacon, a last hope in the suffocating dark. She stumbled across the road, her voice breaking as she screamed, "Please help my mama." The words shattered the diner's casual hum, silencing the bikers mid-conversation. Cups paused at lips, heads turned, and the air grew heavy with sudden attention. Arya's small frame trembled, her pink ribbon dangling from her braid, her tear-streaked face illuminated by the neon's red and blue flicker. Marcus Steele, the largest among them, set his sandwich down on the bike's seat, his scarred cheek catching the light. His eyes, hardened by years of battles seen and unseen, softened as they met Aria's. He knelt before her, his broad frame lowering to her level, his voice calm but firm, cutting through the chaos of her sobs. "Who's hurting her, sweetheart?" Aria's chest heaved, her words tumbling out between gasps. "The rich man," she cried, pointing shakily toward the mansion, its lights glowing ominously atop the hill. "He's beating my mama. Please hurry." Marcus's jaw tightened, a shadow of resolve crossing his face. He stood, his leather vest creaking, and turned to his crew. "Tank, Grit, ride with me," he said, his tone leaving no room for hesitation. The two men nodded, their faces grim as they swung onto their bikes. The others moved to surround Aria, one offering a gentle pat on her shoulder, another murmuring, "You're safe now, kid." The night trembled as engines roared to life, their deep growl shaking the ground like a gathering storm. Headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the road back to the estate. Marcus revved his bike, the sound a promise of reckoning, and the trio sped off, gravel spitting beneath their tires. Aria stood frozen, her small hands clutching her ribbon, her sobs quieting as she watched the bikes disappear toward the mansion. The neon sign buzzed above her, the remaining bikers forming a protective circle around her. For the first time that night, a flicker of hope sparked in her young eyes, a fragile belief that her cry had been heard, that her mama might be saved. The world, once deaf, now thrummed with the echo of engines racing to her rescue. Inside the Garfield estate, the air was thick with tension, the dining hall a battleground of silence and rage. Lily stood trembling near the mahogany table, her bruised wrist cradled against her chest. The shards of the shattered glass still glittered on the marble floor, a stark reminder of Andrew Garfield's fury. His whiskey-soaked breath hung heavy as he paced, his tailored shirt rumpled, his eyes wild with unchecked anger. The other staff lingered at the edges of the room, their faces pale, their silence complicit in the face of his power. "You're ungrateful," Garfield spat, slamming his palm on the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot, making Lily flinch. "You think I built this empire to be disrespected by a maid?" His voice dripped with disdain, each word a lash meant to cut deeper than the last. "You and that brat of yours, replaceable, both of you." Lily's throat tightened, but she kept her gaze lowered, her pride battling the fear clawing at her chest. "I'm sorry, sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a practiced response to keep the storm at bay. But her thoughts were with Aria, praying her daughter had reached safety, praying she'd found someone, anyone, to hear her cry. Suddenly, a low rumble pierced the mansion's oppressive quiet, distant at first, like thunder rolling in from the horizon. It grew louder, insistent, shaking the crystal chandeliers ever so slightly. Garfield paused mid-rant, his head tilting toward the sound. Lily's breath caught, her heart pounding as the noise swelled into a roar, a chorus of engines screaming with purpose. Outside, the estate guards scrambled toward the marble gates, their radios crackling with urgency. Headlights sliced through the darkness, casting stark beams across the manicured lawns. The iron gates, gleaming under the moonlight, stood no chance against the force approaching. The rumble became a deafening growl, shaking the ground as 3 motorcycles tore up the driveway, their tires spitting gravel like sparks. The heavy front doors of the mansion burst open with a crash, the sound reverberating through the grand foyer. Marcus Steele strode in first, his black leather vest glinting under the chandelier's glow, his scarred face set in a mask of resolve. Behind him, Tank and Grit flanked like sentinels, their heavy boots echoing on the marble. The air shifted, the estate's sterile perfection disrupted by the raw, unyielding presence of men who carried the weight of justice in their stance. Marcus's eyes locked on Garfield, who stood frozen near the dining table, his whiskey glass still in hand. "You the man who beats women?" Marcus asked, his voice low and steady, cutting through the room like a blade. Garfield blinked, disbelief flashing across his face before twisting into fury. "You're trespassing," he snarled, stepping forward, his chest puffed with the arrogance of wealth. "This is private property. Get out before I have you arrested." Marcus didn't flinch, his gaze unwavering. "Your name was screamed in fear down the street," he said coldly. "That makes it my business." Lily stared, her breath hitching, disbelief rooting her to the spot. She hadn't yet grasped the miracle. That Arya, her brave little girl, had found these men, had brought them here. Her heart surged with a mix of hope and fear, her eyes darting between Marcus and Garfield. Tank moved swiftly, positioning himself between Lily and Garfield, his massive frame a quiet shield. "Ma'am, step back," he said gently, his voice a low rumble. Lily hesitated, then took a shaky step away, her hands still trembling. Garfield's face reddened, his ego unraveling under the biker's scrutiny. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he spat, his voice rising. "I could buy you 10 times over." Marcus's jaw tightened, but his tone remained even. "Keep talking, and you'll be buying a hospital bed." The billionaire's smirk faltered, his bravado cracking. He took a reckless step toward Marcus, his hand balling into a fist as if to shove him. It was a mistake. Marcus, an ex-soldier whose reflexes were honed by years of survival, moved like lightning. He caught Garfield's wrist midair, twisting it with controlled force until the billionaire dropped to his knees, gasping in pain. "Don't," Marcus muttered, his voice a low growl. "You're not worth the damage." Garfield's eyes widened, his breath ragged, his power reduced to nothing in the grip of a man who answered to no one. The room was silent save for the faint hum of the chandeliers and the distant tick of a clock. Grit stood watch near the door, his arms crossed, ensuring no one interfered. The staff, still hovering at the edges, exchanged uneasy glances, their loyalty to Garfield wavering in the face of this new authority. Lily's knees weakened, her mind racing to piece together how these strangers had come to her aid. Arya, she thought, her heart swelling with both pride and terror. Her little girl had done this, had run into the night and found heroes in leather vests. She clutched her bruised wrist, tears welling, but held back by sheer will. From outside, a new sound broke the tension. Sirens, sharp and insistent, growing closer. Red and blue lights spilled through the tall windows, flashing across the marble floors like a warning. Someone, perhaps a guard, perhaps a staff member fearing the chaos, had called the police. The estate, once a fortress of Garfield's control, now pulsed with the promise of reckoning. Marcus released Garfield's wrist, stepping back but keeping his eyes locked on the billionaire, who slumped against the table, his bravado shattered. The sirens grew louder, their wail a harbinger of consequences Andrew Garfield could no longer escape. Red and blue lights spilled through the tall windows of the Garfield estate, painting the marble floors with flashes of retribution. Marcus Steele stood firm, his eyes never leaving the billionaire slumped against the dining table, his bravado shattered. The air in the grand hall was heavy, the chandelier's soft glow clashing with the pulsing urgency outside. Lily Adams clutched her bruised wrist, her heart pounding as hope and fear collided within her. The staff lingered at the edges, their silence a mix of fear and awe, as the mansion's sterile perfection crumbled under the weight of truth. The front doors swung open again, and 3 police officers stepped inside, their boots heavy on the polished floor. Their hands rested near their holsters, guns low but ready, their faces stern yet cautious. The lead officer, a grizzled man with graying temples, scanned the room, taking in the scene. Marcus and his bikers, imposing in their leather vests. Lily, trembling but upright. And Garfield, disheveled, his whiskey glass abandoned on the table beside him. Garfield lurched to his feet, his face twisting into a mask of indignation. "Officers, thank God you're here," he bellowed, pointing a shaking finger at Marcus. "These thugs broke into my home. They assaulted me, Andrew Garfield. I'm the victim here." The officers exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Marcus stepped back, his hands raised slightly to signal compliance. But his scarred face remained impassive, his silence louder than Garfield's protests. Tank and Grit stood their ground near the door, their presence a quiet anchor in the chaos. Lily's breath hitched, her body trembling as she stepped forward. Her voice was soft but steady, carrying the weight of years of endurance. "He hit me," she said, her eyes locked on the lead officer. "In front of my daughter. And he's done it before." The words hung in the air, raw and unyielding, each syllable a brick in the wall of Garfield's undoing. She lifted her sleeve, revealing the fresh bruise blooming on her wrist, the purple mark a silent witness to her truth. The lead officer's gaze softened, though his jaw tightened. He nodded to his partner, a younger woman with sharp eyes, who stepped closer to examine Lily's injury. The third officer, a broad-shouldered man, moved toward Garfield, his handcuffs glinting in the chandelier light. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us," he said, his tone calm but firm. Garfield's face reddened, his voice rising to a frantic pitch. "You can't do this," he shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "I know people, senators, judges. I'll have your badges for this." Marcus's voice cut through, low and deliberate, like a blade honed by years of discipline. "Then call them," he said, his eyes cold. "Tell them money couldn't save you from the truth." Garfield froze, his mouth opening, but no words coming. The weight of Marcus's words, backed by the biker's unyielding presence, stripped away the billionaire's armor. The room seemed to shrink, the opulence of the estate, its marble floors, its glittering fixtures, reduced to a hollow backdrop for his fall. A small figure appeared in the doorway, her bare feet pattering against the marble. Aria, her nightdress still smudged with dirt, her pink ribbon trailing from her braid, ran toward Lily with a cry. "Mama," she sobbed, throwing herself into her mother's arms. Lily sank to her knees, enveloping Aria in a fierce embrace, tears spilling down her cheeks as she pressed her daughter close. The pain in her wrist, the ache in her side, faded against the warmth of Aria's small body, safe at last. Marcus watched the reunion, his expression softening for the first time that night. He shrugged off his heavy leather jacket, its worn patches catching the light, and draped it gently over Lily's shoulders. The weight of it was grounding, its warmth a shield against the cold fear that had gripped her. "Nobody touches a woman like you," he said quietly, his voice a promise carved in steel. "Not while we ride." Lily looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with gratitude and disbelief. She clutched Aria tighter, the jacket enveloping them both like a mantle of protection. The staff, still hovering at the edges, shifted uncomfortably, some lowering their gazes, others whispering among themselves. Mrs. Claremont, the head housekeeper, stood rigid, her pinched lips betraying a flicker of shame. The officers moved decisively now. The younger woman guided Lily and Aria to a corner, speaking softly to confirm details, while the broad-shouldered officer approached Garfield. "Hands behind your back, sir," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The cuffs clicked shut, the sound sharp and final, echoing through the hall like a gavel's strike. Garfield's shoulders slumped, his earlier bluster replaced by a stunned silence as the reality of his ruin sank in. "You're making a mistake," he muttered, his voice hollow as the officers led him toward the door. His expensive loafers dragged against the marble, a stark contrast to the confidence he'd once wielded like a weapon. The lead officer ignored him, jotting notes on a pad, while the woman officer stayed with Lily, ensuring she felt safe. Outside, the red and blue lights pulsed relentlessly, their glow spilling through the tall windows and reflecting off the estate's polished surfaces. The police car waited at the base of the grand steps, its door open like a mouth ready to swallow Garfield's empire of silence. The officers guided him down the driveway, his tailored shirt creased, his wrists bound in cold steel cuffs that caught the mansion's lights in fleeting glints. The police car door slammed shut, its sound a final punctuation on Andrew Garfield's fall. The red and blue lights pulsed across the Garfield estate's marble facade, reflecting off the cold steel cuffs binding the billionaire's wrists. Lily held Arya close, her daughter's small frame trembling but safe. Marcus stood nearby, his presence a quiet pillar of strength. Tank and Grit exchanged a nod, their mission fulfilled but their vigilance unbroken. The estate, once a fortress of Garfield's untouchable power, now stood exposed, its grandeur dimmed by the truth carried in a child's cry. The first light of dawn crept through the thin curtains of a modest motel room, casting soft stripes across the worn carpet. Lily Adams stirred on the narrow bed, her body heavy with the weight of the previous night. Arya lay curled beside her, her small chest rising and falling in the gentle rhythm of sleep, her pink ribbon still tangled in her braid. The room was a stark contrast to the opulent prison of the Garfield estate. A chipped nightstand, a flickering TV bolted to the wall, a faint smell of stale coffee lingering in the air. Yet, under the protective care of the local authorities, it felt like a sanctuary, a fragile bubble of safety after the storm. Lily's eyes fluttered open, her bruised wrist throbbing faintly as she shifted. The events of the night replayed in fragments. Garfield's rage, Arya's desperate run, the roar of motorcycles, and Marcus's unyielding stand. She reached out, brushing a stray lock from Arya's face, her heart swelling with relief that her daughter was here unharmed. The motel's quiet hum, distant traffic, a low buzz from the air conditioner, was a balm after the mansion's oppressive silence. A soft knock at the door broke her reverie. Lily tensed, her instincts still raw, but a familiar voice followed, low and steady. "It's Marcus. Brought breakfast." She rose, smoothing her borrowed sweatshirt, and opened the door to find Marcus Steele standing there, his leather vest replaced by a plain jacket, a paper bag in one hand and a tray of coffee cups in the other. His scarred face softened with a faint smile, though his eyes carried the weight of a man who'd seen too much. "Pancakes for the kid," he said, nodding toward Arya, who was stirring awake. "Coffee for you. Figured you could use it." Lily managed a small, grateful smile, stepping aside to let him in. "You didn't have to do this," she said, her voice hoarse but warm. Marcus set the bag on the nightstand, the scent of warm pancakes and syrup filling the room. "Didn't have to," he said simply, "but I wanted to." Arya sat up, rubbing her eyes, her face lighting up at the sight of the food. "Pancakes," she chirped, her voice a bright note in the morning's quiet. As Arya dug into the fluffy stack, drizzling syrup with childlike enthusiasm, Lily sat across from Marcus, cradling the steaming coffee cup. Its warmth seeped into her hands, grounding her. The room was small, but the space between them felt safe, filled with an unspoken understanding. Marcus leaned back in the creaky chair, his gaze steady but kind. "You held it together back there," he said. "Most people would have broken." Lily shook her head, her eyes on Arya. "I didn't have a choice. She's my everything." Her voice trembled, but she straightened, her pride intact. "3 years ago, I lost my husband. construction accident. Since then, it's been me and her against the world. I couldn't let her see me fall apart. Marcus nodded, his expression softening further, a flicker of something personal crossing his face. I get that, he said quietly. Lost people too. War does that. Leaves you fighting for something bigger than yourself. He glanced at Arya, who was drawing smiley faces in the syrup with her fork. You didn't just survive last night, Lily. You reminded people like me what right looks like. The words settled over her like a warm blanket, easing the ache in her chest. She met his gaze, seeing not just the scarred ex-soldier, but a man who'd answered a child's cry when no one else would. Why did you come? She asked softly. You didn't know us. Marcus leaned forward, his voice low but firm. A kid runs up, crying about her mama? That's not something you walk away from. Not if you've got a shred of decency left. Arya looked up, her mouth smeared with syrup. You're like a superhero, Mr. Marcus, she said, her eyes wide with awe. You saved Mama. Marcus chuckled, a rare sound that softened his rugged edges. Nah, kid. Your Mama's the strong one. I just showed up. Lily's eyes glistened, but she blinked back the tears, her smile genuine for the first time in days. The moment was interrupted by a sharp buzz from her phone on the nightstand. She hesitated, then answered, her voice cautious. Hello. A warm, steady voice came through, a caseworker from a local women's shelter. Ms. Adams, we've heard what happened. We have a safe apartment ready for you and your daughter, if you're willing. You wouldn't have to go back to that place. Lily's breath caught, her hand tightening around the phone. Thank you, she managed, her voice thick with emotion. We'll take it. As she hung up, she looked at Arya, who was licking syrup off her fingers, and then at Marcus, whose quiet nod spoke volumes. A new beginning, fragile but real, was within reach. Marcus rose, gathering the empty coffee cups. He crossed to the motel window, pulling back the curtain to reveal the morning sun climbing over the city's edge. The light spilled in, catching the dust motes in the air. Outside, the world was waking, cars humming, birds calling, life moving forward. Marcus turned back to Lily, his voice soft but resolute. Some cries you just don't ignore, he said, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. Lily nodded, clutching Arya's small hand, the weight of his words anchoring her. The motel room, with its chipped paint and creaky furniture, felt like a bridge to something better, a place where fear might finally loosen its grip. Weeks later, the late autumn sun filtered through the sheer curtains of a small apartment, its warm glow softening the edges of a new life. The one-bedroom unit, provided by a community program for women escaping abuse, was modest but theirs, a sanctuary of second-hand furniture and fresh paint, free from the cold grandeur of the Garfield estate. The living room held a sagging couch, a wooden coffee table scarred with history, and a corner where Arya's drawings were pinned to the wall like bursts of color against the beige. The air smelled of coffee and hope, a stark contrast to the sterile polish that once clung to Lily's skin. Lily Adams stood at the kitchen counter, slicing apples for Arya's lunch. Her hands, still rough from years of scrubbing, moved with a new ease, unburdened by the weight of constant dread. The bruise on her wrist had faded to a faint shadow, a reminder of the night that had changed everything. Arya, now 7 and brimming with energy, sat cross-legged on the floor, her backpack open beside her. She hummed as she packed her pencils, her smile brighter each day since starting school again. The local elementary had welcomed her with open arms, and her laughter filled the apartment, a melody Lily hadn't dared hope to hear again. "Mama, can I bring my picture to show Miss Carter?" Arya asked, holding up a sketch of a motorcycle with a caped rider soaring under a yellow sun. "She said she likes my drawings." Lily's heart warmed, her smile genuine. Of course, sweetheart. Miss Carter's gonna love it. She tucked a braid behind Aria's ear, marveling at the resilience in her daughter's eyes. School had become a refuge for Aria, a place where she could be a child again, not a witness to fear. The apartment door swung open with a familiar creak, and Marcus Steele stepped inside, a grocery bag slung over one shoulder. His leather vest was back, but his scarred face carried a warmth that softened its edges. Behind him, Tank and Grit followed, each lugging a bag of their own, cans of soup, fresh bread, a carton of milk. The bikers had become regular visitors, their presence as steady as the hum of their engines. "Thought you might need a restock," Marcus said, setting the bag on the counter. "And Tank here insists on fixing that leaky sink before it drives you crazy." Tank, a bear of a man with a booming laugh, grinned. "Can't have you swimming in here, Lily." He headed to the tiny bathroom, toolbox in hand, while Grit unpacked groceries, his quiet demeanor a contrast to Tank's easy chatter. Lily shook her head, a soft laugh escaping. "You all don't have to keep doing this," she said, though her gratitude was clear. "You've already done so much." Marcus leaned against the counter, his eyes meeting hers. "We're not keeping score," he said simply. "You and the kid deserve a break." Aria bounded over, thrusting her drawing at Marcus. "Look, Mr. Marcus. It's you and Tank and Grit, superheroes on bikes." The sketch showed 3 leather-clad figures, their motorcycles soaring like comets, with Aria and Lily smiling beneath a rainbow. "Your mama's angels," she declared proudly. Marcus's chuckle was low and warm, his fingers careful as he held the paper. "Angels, huh? That's a new one, kid." He pinned the drawing to the fridge with a magnet, its bright colors a beacon in the small kitchen. "Gonna keep this one safe." Lily watched the exchange, her chest tightening with a mix of gratitude and something deeper, an unspoken bond growing between her and Marcus. It wasn't loud or rushed, but quiet, built on shared moments of survival and strength. She saw it in the way he listened when she spoke, in the way his eyes softened when Aria laughed. He was a man who carried his own scars, war loss, battles fought in silence, and yet he showed up, steady and unyielding. That afternoon, Lily stepped into her new job at a community kitchen downtown, a bustling space funded by donations inspired by her story. The headlines had spread like wildfire. Bikers save maid and daughter from abusive billionaire. And the outpouring of support had been overwhelming. Local businesses had rallied, offering resources to help women like Lily rebuild. She moved through the kitchen with purpose, chopping vegetables and stirring pots, her hands finding a rhythm that felt like creation rather than servitude. The head chef, a kind-eyed woman named Rosa, had welcomed her warmly, seeing not a victim, but a survivor with a gift for bringing people together. "Mama, it smells so good here," Aria said, perched on a stool during a visit, her nose wrinkling happily at the scent of simmering soup. The kitchen was a far cry from the Garfield estate's sterile halls. Here, laughter mingled with the clatter of pans, and every meal was a small act of community. As evening fell, the apartment courtyard came alive with the sizzle of a small barbecue, organized by Marcus and his crew. The Iron Wolves, as their biker club was known, filled the space with easy camaraderie. Tank flipped burgers on a portable grill, his laughter booming as Grit teased him about his cooking skills. A portable speaker played soft rock, its notes weaving through the warm autumn air. Neighbors from the apartment complex joined in, drawn by the music and the scent of charcoal, their kids chasing Aria in a game of tag. Lily stood by the grill, a soda in hand, watching Aria dart through the grass, her giggles a melody of healing. Marcus sidled up, a paper plate of food in hand, his presence a quiet anchor. She's something else, he said, nodding toward Arya. Got your strength. Lily's smile was soft, her eyes reflecting the firelight. She's got her own kind, she said. Running out that night, finding you. I'll never stop being amazed by her. Marcus nodded, his gaze distant for a moment, as if remembering his own battles. Takes a spark like that to change things, he said. You both did that. The courtyard glowed with warmth. Lanterns strung across the fence, the chatter of new friends, the clink of bottles raised in quiet toasts. Lily looked around, at Arya's laughter, at the bikers who'd become family, at the community that had rallied around her. The Garfield estate, with its cold marble and suffocating silence, felt like a distant memory. Here, under the open sky, fear had no place. Only warmth, music, and the promise of new roads stretching forward. Months later, the city buzzed with Lily Adams's name, whispered in coffee shops and shouted in headlines. She was no longer the invisible maid scrubbing floors in a billionaire's cage. She was a symbol of courage, a woman who'd stood against power and won. The story of her and Arya's escape, carried by a child's cry and answered by leather-clad heroes, had ignited a spark across the community. Donations poured into the women's shelter that housed them, and the community kitchen where Lily worked had become a beacon of hope, its tables filled with people sharing meals and stories of resilience. In a small park near their apartment, the late spring sun cast a golden glow over the grass, where Arya darted between swings and slides, her laughter ringing like a bell. Her cotton dress, bright blue and free of smudges, fluttered as she chased a butterfly, her pink ribbon bouncing in her braid. At 7, she carried a lightness that had returned in full, her eyes no longer shadowed by fear, but alight with the boundless energy of childhood. Lily sat on a weathered bench nearby, her hands folded in her lap, the faint scar on her wrist a quiet reminder of the night that had changed everything. Marcus Steele settled beside her, his leather vest swapped for a plain jacket, though the familiar weight of his presence remained. The park was alive with the hum of life. Children shouting, leaves rustling in the warm breeze, the distant hum of the city. He stretched his long legs out, his scarred cheek catching the sunlight, and watched Arya with a faint smile. The Iron Wolves had become a fixture in their lives, stopping by with groceries, helping with repairs, or simply sharing quiet evenings. But it was Marcus's steady presence, his quiet strength, his unspoken understanding, that had woven itself into Lily's days. Lily tilted her head, her voice soft but curious. "You ever wonder why you stopped that night?" she asked, her eyes tracing the horizon where the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose. "You could have kept eating your sandwich," ignored her cry. "Most would have." Marcus leaned back, his gaze distant, as if sifting through memories of battles fought and lost. "Maybe it wasn't chance," he said, his voice low and deliberate, like the rumble of his bike. "Maybe it was a cry meant for someone who'd listen. I've heard too many screams in my life. War, loss. You learn which ones you can't walk away from." He glanced at her, his eyes holding a depth that spoke of scars beyond the one on his face. Arya's was one of them. Lily nodded, her throat tightening. The weight of that night still lingered. The terror of Garfield's rage, the miracle of Arya's bravery, the roar of engines that had shattered the silence. But here, in the park's soft light, those memories felt like stepping stones to this moment. "I used to think I was alone," she said quietly. "After my husband died, it was just me and her, fighting to keep going. But that night, you showed me there are still people who hear." Marcus's smile was small but genuine, a rare crack in his stoic exterior. "You showed me something too," he said. "Strength isn't just surviving. It's standing up, speaking out, even when you're scared. You and that kid, you're the real heroes." Before Lily could respond, Arya bounded over, her cheeks flushed from play. She clutched a new drawing, her pencil strokes bold and vibrant. "Mama, Mr. Marcus. Look," she said, thrusting the paper forward. It showed a vivid scene. Lily and Arya hand in hand, surrounded by Marcus, Tank, and Grit on their motorcycles, all under a massive golden sun. Flowers dotted the edges, and a rainbow arced above. "That's us," she declared proudly, her eyes shining. Marcus took the drawing, his calloused fingers careful not to smudge it. "That's us all right," he said, his voice warm. "Keep seeing the good stuff, kid. Don't ever stop." Arya beamed, then darted back to the swings, her laughter trailing behind her like a melody. Lily watched her go, her heart full. The park was a world away from the Garfield estate's cold marble halls, its oppressive silence replaced by the sounds of life. Wind in the trees, children's shouts, the soft creak of the bench beneath them. As the sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the grass, the familiar rumble of engines approached. Tank and Grit pulled into the park's lot, their bikes gleaming in the fading light. They waved, their grins wide, and Arya ran to greet them, her drawing clutched like a flag of triumph. The bikers dismounted, joining the small crowd of neighbors and friends who'd gathered for an impromptu evening under the open sky. Lily leaned back, her shoulder brushing Marcus's, the contact brief but grounding. The quiet bond between them had grown over months, not rushed or loud, but steady, built on mutual respect and shared scars. She thought of her husband, the love they'd shared, and how she'd once believed her heart would never heal. Yet here, in this moment, she felt a new kind of hope, not just for survival, but for living. The bikers' engines revved softly as they prepared to leave, the sound no longer a harbinger of chaos, but a gentle hum of calm, fading into the twilight. Lily stood, calling Arya over, and the little girl ran into her arms, her warmth a reminder of all they'd overcome. As the bikes rolled away, their taillights glowed like fireflies against the deepening blue, carrying away the last echoes of pain. Lily knelt, pulling Arya close, her voice a soft whisper against her daughter's ear. "You don't ignore a cry like that," she said, her words echoing the desperate night that had brought them here. The sunset bathed the park in gold, the wind carrying the promise of new beginnings. Because sometimes, the smallest voice can awaken the biggest heroes.